Brian, do you know, have we ever talked about this with specificity? I know you know in general terms, all those interviews that are now hailed as the classic promos from Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen and Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors and me, whoever on the old Saturday night TBS Studio 605 show that's been the hit on the network and it's just played and played to this day. You know approximately what those interviews were formatted in the show, the length of them, what they were formatted to be. But have we ever specifically talked about this?
What do you mean? The way you're phrasing the question, what are you wondering if we've talked about?
Okay, well,
We've talked about local promos. We've talked about promos being formatted in the shows.
I'll try to speak in more specificity. How long were those fucking things versus how long are the promos that we're getting to see today?
I mean, if someone went 2 minutes, that was long.
Bingo. And I mean, on SmackDown, and we'll talk about it when we get there, but it's endemic or pandemic or epidemic or whatever the possibly, eumatic or even Vegematic. The promos are endless now these days. The live interviews and the soliloquies and the confrontations and the back and forth and the witty banter and et cetera, et cetera. And yes, there are some that are memorable, and generally they revolve around the big return or the big reveal or whatever. But the reason why that so many of the great promos of those days are always, Ric Flair, does anybody ever remember a bad promo, but they can quote all the fucking lines? And Dusty Rhodes, people have committed their lives to memorizing the Hard Times promo or the fucking whatever the fuck. They were 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes on the format. It was literally Dusty, when he wrote the TBS show, he would give, if he wanted to give the middle card guys the opportunity to speak and see if they might, pick up some fans and just see what they could do. They're like a minute at the desk. And some of them could and some of them couldn't get through that. And for some of even the baby faces that you had to hear from, but they weren't noted orators, 1.5 at the desk, plug the match, Zabada. But for Flair and the Horsemen and, the Warriors, the top guys that were noted as being able to, it was still 2 minutes. And it wasn't hard though, because Dusty would sit obviously in the producer's chair in the, control room, and they didn't count you down. They gave you the signals. Like, you have 30 seconds left. You got you have 15 seconds left. And if you're cooking and you were Ric Flair or Tully and Arn or Jim Cornette or the Road Warriors or whoever the fuck, you knew that you were probably going to get the slow rap when you went over 2 minutes, which would be the finger waving in the air in a circle in a slow manner. That's what does it, giving the slow rap, baby. If you were overtime and your shit was stinking, you would get a goddamn rap, and sometimes even they'd signal to Tony with the thumb like a hitchhiker, like pull a fucking microphone, and you knew to just shut up and get the fuck out of there. But we usually didn't get that. I don't think I ever got that. But that was Dusty's way of, okay, this is the framework. You probably should be able to say all the shit that you need to say and get my issue over that I've given you with whoever in a couple minutes, and we'll move on. And that's why they were so high energy. But at the same point, if you were cooking, he would let you, finish your tray. If the rap started quickening, you knew that maybe he was starting to get unhappy. But as long as it was slow, you knew how to get out of there.
And no one overstayed their welcome.
No. Well, every once in a while, but it wasn't by time. It was just by material and fucking execution.
That's true. It was more like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Here comes like, Paul Jones's army again. It's going to feel like an hour.
But that I mean, I understand they got 3-hour television show. Of course, this one was 2 hours. Still, we had a ton of talent. But, I mean, in numerous, not we all had tons of talent, yes, but we had a ton of talent on the program. But goddamn, the problem is now that, as we'll talk about, and then I'll get off of this shit, the WWE has made the expectation of the majority of the television audience that when you see the stars on the program, the people that you really care about, most of the time, is going to be the interviews and the promos that they're doing and or that you're interested in. And sometimes when they do wrestle, you see a bit of it on television. Much of it is in the commercial break. And it ends in an angle to get you to want to hear the next promo to explain it. They have completely flip-flopped. Promos started out and interviews started out as a way to sell the match, and now the matches exist to sell fucking next promos. And it's working for them.
And it works. And that's part of the thing. I guess when it comes to the old TBS show, sometimes we'd see you twice in the show. You'd have your squash match and you'd have your promo. It's almost like they got rid of the match part of it. Yeah. And they give everyone the same amount of time. All right, go out there and you can talk for this long. Here's the other question. And most of the guys they have on the mic on these main shows are pretty good, at least for WWE. But how do you unproduce, or how do you take someone who's been so produced as far as how they talk and what they say and the cadence and everything else and get them to be natural? Because the Road Warriors were ridiculous as a concept if you really close your eyes and think about it, but it worked and they were believable, but they were also kind of themselves. You could say that about everyone on that show, but if everyone on that show was taught a way to speak, you can't just say, okay, everyone just be yourselves. Just go out there and be yourselves. Like, how do you walk that part back?
Okay, and hold on. I'm just thinking Hawk and Animal. If you tried to get them to act either one of them any other way, like anybody else, I don't know Hawk, he could act the fool, as they say, in a number of ways in the locker room and put on accents or whatever the fuck, but it wouldn't, it was just joshing around. You can see Hawk joshing. They couldn't be anybody else but that, because it was they were only that loud in real life, maybe 20-25% of the time. But Hawk, he would turn and say, well, he'd say that in the locker room to start out a fucking sentence, but they just turned it up. And to the question you asked is, how do you get somebody to just go, okay, now don't do any of that acting shit, just come up with a way to be interesting on your own.
And don't use the words that sound so fake. I want an opportunity for the belt. Like, just little things that they make everyone do. And because everyone does it, no one sounds like anything other than a robot when they do it.
Yeah, and you have the outstanding verbal artists like the Punks and the Romanses and the people who can. Punk speaks to them in his own words. Nobody writes it. They might write the concept, and he somehow translates it and walks the line, blah, 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 and it sounds natural. Roman is another budding Hollywood superstar. He's that guy, and he's got into this whole thing. He's going to be Schwarzenegger one day, whatever the fuck. But the guys at the top, whoever they may be, they're good at it, but still there's not the animosity that you used to see in wrestling promos of guys either getting in each other's faces and having to be fucking held back while they're screaming and slobbering on each other, you motherfucker, without saying that, or a guy cutting just for 2 minutes or whatever, an intense promo vowing revenge or retribution or mayhem or whatever with fire in his eyes and get people to believe it, because it's become so, this is all prepared for you to say as part of the greater, stage play in progress. And for guys who never done just cut a promo on this motherfucker. Here, you guys are mad. Here's why. Go fucking. And not only would that probably be petrifying, but also, like you said, how do you start thinking that way all of a sudden when you've been told another thing? The reason why these guys in the territory days, the memorable ones, could do this is because a bunch of them couldn't and nobody remembers them. But you had to learn because they were going to tell you what to talk about, and they might give you lines to say, or boy, here, zing him with it, or whatever. But basically, it was the sell tickets. Become whatever your fucking gimmick is that we are currently portraying you to be. Be that. Talk like that, and it better be goddamn interesting, positive or negative. Because if it's not, then we'll finish you up and do something else, some angle with somebody else. And so that's how those guys, that's why everything was different. And the cadences and the deliveries and the material and the way of going about it, except for, obviously, Dick Slater thought he was Terry Funk for years. And, there was still imitation. A gimmick that was over in the Carolinas, a guy would see it and he'd try to do it in fucking Texas or Portland or whatever. But it was still his take on a classic. And now everybody's learning in almost the same place, or in the indies, they're not learning this at all because there's no need for it because they're not on fucking television. And they don't, I won't say there's no need for it. There's no way for them to apply it.
There's no personal incentive, though, other than like I want to get signed and I want to be on TV. It's not like I won't make money unless I could do this right.
Yes, that's the problem is at this point, whether you can do this right or wrong at some level, and now especially with Tony around with a blank checkbook, you can make money. But, being memorable and making money over a long period of time is a different story. But I think that's with some of these guys at the top, which is, I was told this by a person one time with connections to the UFC in a very close fashion at one time, that I don't know whether they're on the ins or outs now, so I don't want to bury him. But Dana White would let the guys at the top that he knew were kind of smart to what they were doing pull a little bullshit amongst themselves verbally and in the press conferences and everything to hype the fights. That's not saying their fight was crooked or fixed, but they knew they were going to make more money if they promoted it and got people interested. And he knew that too. So, and he didn't go to him and say, I know what you're doing, because, but at the same time, he let him do it on numerous occasions.
He realizes the UFC wouldn't be as popular as it got if everyone did Bob Backlund promos.
Exactly. But at the same time, he was protective enough of the credibility and integrity of his business that he wasn't going to let the guys in the fucking opening match go out and shoot their own fucking angles without yanking a knot in their tail or firing them outright, which is, here's a lesson to be learned by today's wrestling. So it depended on who it was, and that's kind of the way that wrestling developed. Depending on who you were, that's what you got, the level of what you got away with. If you're the main event, if you're the guy selling the tickets, if you're drawing fucking money, if you're really good at what you're doing in some fashion or another, it's beneficial to the promoter, you get away with more shit than if you're fucking and going into business for yourself or doing whatever, than if you're jerking a curtain and you just think you're hot shit. And that should be applied more to the wrestling business today. How did we get on this topic from times of promos?
We're talking about the formatting of promos. You were talking about the promos at TBS, and that created the situation for the compare and contrast to modern talkers and how they do it and where they do it.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. fucking Proctor, you analyst, you.
Well, thank you.
Let's...
Oh, that was a long one. That was a long one. Mexican last night.
Oh, me. What was her name? No, come on now.
Hey,
stop doing things
don't
like
be rude.
that. What, Rick? I'm